Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Secrets of the Patagonian Desert. The main goal of this thread is to discuss the possibility of any strange occurrences and local legends about the Patagonian Desert. The quick facts. Largest desert in Argentina. 8th largest desert in the world. Considered a cold weather desert, average yearly temperature is 3 degrees Celsius. Sparsely populated to this day, and previously home to an esoteric community of various Native American tribes, most of which are nearly extinct, if not already. Also include discussion here about Greater Patagonia, up into where the Pampas grasslands begin. The long story short version is, for such a large rural area, are there really known alien, occult, and/or paranormal stories to come out of it? Argentines and Chileans are especially welcome.
I was born and raised in Patagonia, and the whole place is beautiful. But there's way too much weird shit out there that no one out of here talks about. Entire unexplored forests and mountains, entire islands that appear and disappear in the blink of an eye, tales of foreign people succumbing to madness because of the solitude here, huge pillars of fire that manifest out of nowhere and disappear the moment you get close to them, sightings of animal species that you can't find in any book. It's hauntingly beautiful.
Any weird disappearances or unresolved murders in the area? Especially from the 50s and onwards. I can speak Spanish, so you can send me links from local news sources, or if you don't feel like it, just tell me a name to Google and I'll look it up myself. It'd be really hard to find some links. There are some cases indeed, but not officially documented since they happened in the most remote places of the Patagonia, and they've survived only because they became stories the elders tell to their children. You see, right now barely anyone gives a shit about what happens here. Now try to imagine how it was more than half a century ago. But I'll share a tale my grandpa told me. During the 50s, a teacher from the capital was sent here on a small plane to teach in the only school available. Once he came here, he was given his own house and a small patch of land to work and do whatever he wanted. In the school, there were less than 10 children, so once he finished his work, he had nothing else to do. No matter where he looked, there were only infinite plains one side and haunting forests and mountains on the other. Years ago, you had to walk kilometers just to go and talk to your closest neighbor, and the silence was deafening, enough to, slowly but surely, drag the teacher to madness. He started to take long walks while smiling, dragging his luggage with him, until he ended up in the road the small planes used to land, and when people asked him what was he doing, he'd say he'd fly back home. Then he'd extend his arms and run while imitating the sounds of an engine. And then, winter came. The school was closed and wouldn't be opened until spring came, so he was left by himself. Since he had no cattle and couldn't work the land, he had no reason to go outside unless he wanted the cold to kill him. And those weeks, to him, became hell on earth. He started to imagine people, to imagine himself back at home, laughing and crying and screaming by himself. It's said his screams were carried by the wind and can be heard to this day when a snowstorm hits the most remote areas. Then, when winter was about to end, only the last layers of snow left behind to melt, the teacher disappeared. The people searched for him, they called his name, but he was nowhere to be found. And since there were no policemen in such a remote place, they couldn't do more than that, so they gave up after a couple of days. But then, several months later, news began to spread about a man dressed in ragged clothes who made himself known in a local sawmill located in the mountains. Since he was not dangerous nor aggressive, the people there just let him be, thinking he was just a hobo. But every morning at the same hour, he'd come out of the forest and ring the bell that was available there, and when someone asked him why did he do that, he'd say with a smile that he did it because classes were about to start, and the child had to know they couldn't be late. That's when they found out he was the teacher that had gone missing. Once recognized, he was sent to the biggest town in the region, and from there they sent him on a plane back to the capital, laughing and crying tears of joy during the whole ride. I haven't found an official news source of this, but my grandpa and other elders swear it really happened, and honestly, I believe them.
The Patagonian Witcheries. Not so much a mystery as it's a bizarre and spoopy little piece of history. If anyone has any additional info about this, please give. When the sect needs a new Invunch, the council of the cave orders a member to steal a boy child from 6 months to a year old. The deformer, a permanent resident of the cave, starts work at once. He disjoints the arms and legs and the hands and feet. Then begins the delicate task of altering the position of the head. Day after day, for hours to a stretch, he twists the head with a tourniquet until it is rotated through an angle of 180 degrees. That is, until the child can look straight down the line of its own vertebrae. There remains one last operation, for which another specialist is needed. At full moon, the child is laid on a workbench, lashed down with its head covered in a bag. The specialist cuts a deep incision under the right shoulder blade. Into the hole he inserts the right arm and sews up the wound with a thread taken from the neck of a ewe. When it has healed, the Invunch is complete.
The Armadillo Man. This was a strange event that happened to me 6 years ago. Cycling through Patagonia had been one of the most impulsive decisions of my life. I left the city of Bahia Blanca with the brilliant idea of cycling the route to Bariloche, with little more than a backpack, a tent, and a lot of excitement about seeing the green forests and large lakes of southwestern Argentina. I was not alone. My friend Lucas, whom I had met at university and with whom we shared a great love for camping and nature, had joined me on the journey, sharing the load and the endless hours of pedaling. The road had been hard. We had chosen a long route to enjoy the trip, which was not a smart decision since most of Patagonia is still extremely arid. The long stretches of yellowish steppe, the headwind that seemed determined to make us turn back, and the occasional hamlet that barely broke the monotony of the desert made the road somewhat lonely. But solitude had its charm, and with each kilometer traveled, we felt like we were moving away from everything known and closer to something primitive, almost forgotten. After several days pedaling through the Somoncura Plateau in the interior of the province of Rio Negro, we decided to camp in a remote place. There were no marked routes or obvious paths, just an ocean of stones and dry bushes that stretched as far as the eye could see. We set up the tent near some hills to protect us from the strong wind and to have some comfort to rest before continuing the trip. Night fell with terrifying speed, as if the sun had been swallowed by the horizon. We lit a small fire, made some noodles, put some music on our speakers, and drank a couple of beers while we talked about women, soccer, and university stuff until we finally got tired and wrapped ourselves in our sleeping bags, listening to the sound of the wind blowing sand over the stones. It was an eerie silence, a silence that weighed more than usual. I don't know how long we slept before we woke up. Something jolted us out of our sleep. At first, I thought it was the wind hitting the canvas of the tent, but soon I noticed a different sound, a slow, persistent scratching on the rock, followed by a low, almost guttural snort. I lay still, feeling my heart race. Lucas was awake too, his labored breathing betraying that he had heard the same thing. Outside, the moon illuminated the plateau with a dim light. Slowly, I slid the zipper of the tent and poked my head out. A few meters away, a figure moved among the stones. It was tall and hunched, with skin that seemed to be covered in thick plates, like a gigantic armadillo. It walked on 2 legs, with long claws scraping the earth with each step. I froze. Lucas beside me barely dared to breathe. The creature's eyes were small and dark, but they did not reflect light. Rather, they absorbed it, like bottomless pits. At some point, it turned its head in our direction and snapped its jaw with a dry sound. We froze. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, we stared at each other across the vastness of the plateau, the creature studying us, seemingly as frightened by our presence as we were. Then, without warning, the creature disappeared. It gave a shriek that nearly made me shit my pants. It turned and ran across the desert in the opposite direction from us, disappearing among the rocks with superhuman speed, leaving behind only the echo of its wheezing and a slight breeze that stirred the canvas of our tent. We did not sleep again that night. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, we examined the ground with trembling hands, wanting to confirm if what we had seen was a figment of our imagination. Just a few meters from our bikes, we found deep footprints marked in the dry earth that continued in the direction of where the creature had gone. After the scare of that night, we continued on our way, passing through some towns trying to explain what we had seen, but no one had seen anything like it. They told us that we had mistaken it for a normal armadillo, or even looked at us as if we were crazy. Not until we stopped at a roadside post run by an elderly indigenous couple that we received an explanation. They told us that it was an elangasan, a beast from the folklore of the Tehuelche Indians, described exactly as a hairy humanoid with an armadillo shell that inhabits caves and canyons in the desert. The Indians told us that these creatures are harmless, but that if you disturb them too much, they can attack you with their claws or try to throw rocks to scare you away. They also seemed surprised that we saw one since, according to them, they had disappeared even in the generation of their grandparents. After that talk, we did not have any incident or encounter with any strange animal beyond the typical llamas, rheas, foxes, and cavies of the steppe or the deer in the forests of Bariloche, even a puma. But we did not see any indigenous mythological monster again. That is, for our return from Bariloche to Buenos Aires, we finally decided to get a plane ticket. I made a drawing trying to represent the creature. On the other hand, I apologize if you don't like the format of the story. I'm not a regular user of 4chan.
There is an ancient story that the Tehuelches, the so-called Patagonian giants, told to their kids the god Cooch was alone. From his tears he made the sea. From his whispers, the wind, the clouds, land and life. From his hand, a spark of light to cast away the darkness. However, this land was inhabited also by giants, the sons of darkness. Another story is about Elal, the hero Tehuelche. One day, Greentext the giant kidnapped one of the Cloud Sisters, Teo. Blinded by lust, he took her to his cave. Her Cloud Sisters, fueled with rage, created storms and violent winds. Cooch became aware of this situation and prophesized, "If Teo is pregnant, his child will be more powerful than his father." The wind takes the words of Cooch to every corner of the earth. The scared giant tried to kill the baby inside her mother's womb. At night, while Teo was sleeping, he grabbed the baby from her. Before he could finish the job, a tuco, Patagonian mouse, took the baby to his lair. Other animals helped to save the kid. Then a swan took him to distant lands, the Patagonia. The animals helped him, but when the kid started exploring the land, the brothers Kokeshka and Shai, Cold, and Snow bullied him. Elal was smart, so he hitted 2 rocks to scare the brother, making fire. He created the bow and arrow, dominated the animals, and even created the Tehuelches, making clay statues. He told them everything, from the secrets of hunting to everything he knew, so they could pass it to their kids. One day he said goodbye and called his old friend, the swan. They disappeared in the air behind the skyline. It is said that you can see some islands from the Patagonia where Elal waits for the souls of the Tehuelche, so he can hear the stories they have for him.
The myth of the Patagonian giants, like other stories about remote exotic places, captured the European imagination for a very long time. The first mention of this mythical race surfaced in the 1520s from the account of Antonio Pigafetta, chronicler of Ferdinand Magellan's expedition. But one day, without anyone expecting it, we saw a giant who was on the shore, near today's Puerto San Julian, Argentina, quite naked and who danced, leaped, and sang. And while he sang, he threw sand and dust on his head. Our captain, Magellan, sent one of his men toward him, charging him to leap and sing like the other in order to reassure him and to show him friendship, which he did. Immediately, the man of the ship, dancing, led this giant to a small island where the captain awaited him, and when he was before us, he began to marvel and to be afraid, and he raised one finger upward, believing that we came from heaven. And he was so tall that the tallest of us only came up to his waist. Withal, he was well proportioned. The captain named the people of this sort Pathagoni. The etymology of the word is unclear, but Patagonia came to mean land of the big feet. Magellan seized 2 of the younger males as hostages to bring back to Spain, but they got sick and died on the journey. 100 years later, in The World Encompassed, London, 1628, the first detailed account of Sir Francis Drake's circumnavigation, the author, Drake's nephew of the same name, wrote, "Magellan was not altogether deceived in naming them giants, for they generally differ from the common sort of men, both in stature, bigness, and strength of body, as also in the hideousness of their voice, but yet they are nothing so monstrous or giant-like as they were reported, there being some Englishmen as tall as the highest of any that we could see, but peradventure the Spaniards did not think that ever any Englishman would come thither to reprove them, and thereupon might presume the more boldly to lie, the name Pentagons 5 cubits viz. 7 feet and half, describing the full height, if not somewhat more, of the highest of them. But this is certain, that the Spanish cruelties there used, referring to Magellan's hostage-taking, have made them more monstrous in mind and manners than they are in body, and more inhospitable to deal with any strangers that shall come thereafter. He reduced the height of the Patagonians from 10 feet to 7.5 feet, but was obviously more intent on discrediting the Spanish and blaming them for the monstrosity of the giants. Ironically, though, he was really confirming the basic facts behind the myth. In the 1700s, the myth was still alive and entertaining Europeans. Horace Walpole, the English historian and Gothic novelist, published an account of the giants lately discovered. In a letter to a friend in the country following the return in 1766 of Captain John Byron, who had circumnavigated the world in the HMS Dolphin. Word leaked that the crew had seen 9-foot giants in South America. Byron's May docking and Walpole's July publication suggests the rapidity with which rumors passed along the London grapevine. In his 31-page pamphlet, Walpole satirizes the whole idea and facetiously suggests that a limited number of the giant women could be imported for the sake of mending our breed. The official account of Byron's voyage, appearing in 1773, finally debunks the myth, but not without respecting the Patagonians' vertical features. When we came within a little distance from the shore, we saw, as near as I can guess, about 500 people, some on foot, but the greater part on horseback. One of them, who afterwards appeared to be a chief, came towards me. He was of a gigantic stature, and seemed to realize the tales of monsters in a human shape. If I may judge of his height by the proportion of his stature to my own, it could not be much less than 7 feet. Mr. Cumming, one of Byron's officers, came up with the tobacco, a gift, and I could not but smile at his astonishment, which I saw expressed in his countenance upon perceiving himself, though 6 feet 2 inches high, become a pygmy among giants, for these people may indeed more properly be called giants than tall men, the shortest of whom were at least 4 inches taller. In all probability, these accounts were describing the Tehuelche Indians, native to the Patagonian area of Argentina, who are typically tall, but not monstrous giants.
I'll keep posting and translate a book from the 19th century at the same time that talks a bit about the tribes. Terra del Fuego is divided in 3 tribes, Yaghans and Alakuf and the Onus, also called Selk'nam. The first 2 tribes don't speak the same language but look very similar. They are coastal people and live from products of the sea. The Onus, instead, don't know how to use boats and mainly live in the forest and the pampa. It is very difficult to study the Onus since they are nomads. Extremely fierce, as soon as they spot a group of riders, they flee. Onus are tall and well-built, taller than any European country. They have a nice face, good-looking eyes, and very white teeth. They are dark of skin, reddish a bit like a very tan European. They live of the hunt of guanaco, and because of that are constantly moving. Because of that, they don't build permanent houses. They quickly build shelters in bushes. No one on Earth lives as harshly as they do. During winter, the temperatures can drop under -15 degrees. Despite this, they don't wear a lot of clothes. Most of the time, they wear some kind of cloak made out of the skin of a guanaco. They also use said cloak to sleep on it around a campfire. Women wear necklaces made out of seashells or black seeds. They are very fond of glass jewelry, crap jewelry that Western people use to trade with natives. Onas have a few tools at their disposal. They don't know how to use pottery but weave baskets. They use silex and tinder to light up fires. They use bows with stone tips and also fish using nets made out of guanaco's nerves. They also eat whatever vegetable they can get their hands on. These natives, even after being in contact with Europeans, don't use tobacco or alcohol. Same for coffee or tea. That is in complete opposition with the Yaghans or Alakuf, who are learning the new technology and methods impressively quickly. However, Onus learn new languages with ease. If these natives had been fairly treated, they could have been assimilated quite easily. But sadly, they became the victims of adventurers and gold prospectors and have been hunted and stalked like beasts during the expeditions of Lista and Popper in 1886. They domesticated the native South American jackal-like canid culpio, which was named the Fuegian dog by Europeans, remarkably the only canid besides wolves and foxes to be domesticated. It appears they had a symbiotic relationship with these dogs, even though they were semi-feral. They kept them around for warmth and a certain degree of protection. They are extinct, so not much is known about them beyond that. Lista hunted natives like animals, fiercely pursuing them in order to capture a member of their tribe to use as a guide. If the natives fought back with their bows, they were shot down easily. It was a merciless war. When the natives managed to gather enough men, they tried to fight back. After the arrival of Lista and Popper came the gold rush prospectors. They too treated the natives harshly. Onus stole their horses to avenge themselves. In order to punish the thieves, the prospector killed 5 natives per horse. The natives attacked lone prospectors. In this war of skirmishes, the onus were effective. After the prospectors and the gold rush craze died down, came the colonists. They settled in Porvenir and Gente Grande and started to breed sheep. At first, the relations between the natives and the settlers were good. They traded and exchanged gifts. But soon the settlers started to see their flock of sheep diminishing. The mystery was solved when they saw onus wearing the skin of the sheeps. The settlers tried to explain to them they didn't have the right to steal their sheeps, but to no avail. Being unable to convince the natives, the settlers cleared out the natives of their lands. The natives didn't care. The first year, 2,000 sheep were stolen. In 1893, the colonization expanded to the area of Bahia Inútil. All the lowlands was occupied in order to let the sheep graze. The natives have retreated in the mountainous areas where they starve during winter. Onas have interesting myths and tales. At night, they gather around a fire to eat and talk. Sometimes women start singing sad tunes and legends are told. Like all people, they have imagined an origin story. Long ago, they say that the land was inhabited by bearded men that looked like white people. Then the sun and the moon, husband and wife, lived on earth. Men had become evil and warlike. The godly couple retreated to heaven, from which they threw a big red star on earth, Mars, who took the appearance of a giant. The herald arrived with a massive bag, far bigger than the one missionaries put the biscuits they give. All the living people got cooped up in it and slaughtered. Then the herald shaped 2 clay clods, put them next to each other. After 3 moon cycles, a man and woman came out of it. They were the ancestors of the Onas. My family were Basque French immigrants in that region. From what they told me, English sheep ranches were very powerful and dotted the region, but the Indians didn't recognize them and would hunt them. This is where my family comes in. They would be paid to hunt them, and for proof they would bring in the heads of their kills. Mind you, this is the 1890 to 1910 S. My grandpa told me the Indians had no concept of private property, that they would take whatever they saw without asking and give it back at a random date. I wish I had proof or something about my family's hand in the history of Terra del Fuego. Little is known of their religious worldview. The sun, and especially the moon, are in their belief sovereign powers. Onas are excellent fathers. They treat their women and children with affection and kindness. Usually, a man has 3 wives. To them, women's duties are to serve the man. A native asked, "I don't understand what pleasure white people take from working. Why don't they marry multiple women so that they do their work?" The native's medicine isn't complex. When someone is sick, people that share his shelter gather around him and sing incantations while waiting for the shaman. The shaman only used massage as a way to heal people. After finishing the massage, the shaman jumps on the torso of the ill person and tramples it. He also tramples the head. The Onas believe that illnesses are caused by evil spirits that inserted themselves into the body of their victim. Because of that, they think that by pressing on someone, they can make it leave. The natives' burial rites are very simple. They bury the dead where he died, wrapped in his cloak. Only the wives of the deceased show their pain and scarify tattoos on their lower legs and lose a lot of blood in the process. If the Onas are threatened with a future disappearance by the cruelty of the civilized, the Yagans are nearly all exterminated. Of this tribe, only a few remains. In 1870, Yagans were 3,000. 14 years later, 940. In 1895, only 300 were left. Like everywhere else in the world, at first contact illnesses decimated them. Yagans aren't the fierce savages travelers told about. The last ones that stayed in a primitive state are located around the Darwin Isthmus.
Patagonia Gigantes. The Patagonians, or the Patagonian Giants, were a mythical Indian tribe located in the south of the Patagonian region. They came into existence after the first Spanish explorers wrote reports about them. Nowadays, it is known that the tribe were actually the Tehuelches. Cementerio de Impuros. At the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina was receiving a notable amount of immigrants from Europe who wanted to settle down in the country. The criminal group Zui Migdal was formed, and its main income was from brothels and prostitution chains. To get the girls and women they needed, they went back to Eastern Europe and presented themselves as successful businessmen who were looking to get married, and then convinced them to go back to Argentina with them. Once they were out of Europe and in Argentina, the girls were rapidly prostituted. When these activities began to gain notoriety, the immigrant community classified them as impure. The pimps began building their own churches and their own cemeteries. So when the prostitutes and the pimps died, they were buried in the Cementerio de los Impuros. Asesinato del Hombre Gris. The gray man, hombre, gris, comes from the many prophetic drawings from the artist Benjamin Paravicini. The gray man is supposed to bring prosperity and peace for many decades to Argentina. Some believe that this gray man was killed and that he was Alberto Nisman, an attorney who was responsible for the investigation of the AMIA terrorist attack. In 2015, he was found dead the day before the trial, in which he was going to present evidence that could lead to the arrest of top government officials, including Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who was at that time the president.
For me, it's the giant sloth. 130-plus sightings in 18 countries for over 200 years. Up to 5 captured individuals which escaped. Casts of tracks, audio recordings, photos of claw marks, alleged hair and dung, lost photos. Out of sightings from Patagonia, Amazonia, the Yucatan, the Ozarks, Appalachia, and the Yukon, the Amazonian accounts are the best. David Oren pieced together a description of the Mapinguari in 1993, based on interviews with more than 100 claimed eyewitnesses. From their accounts, he described the Mapinguari as a man-sized animal, no more than 1 meter and 80 centimeters long, with long reddish fur, backwards feet, and a monkey-like face. Later in 2001, after speaking with more witnesses and 7 hunters who claimed to have killed specimens, Oren was able to give a presumably more accurate description of the animal. According to his 2001 paper, the Mapinguari is a very heavy, powerfully built animal, up to 2 meters, 6'6", tall when standing bipedally, which breaks the roots of trees with its steps. It is covered in long and coarse fur which ranges in color from reddish to brownish to blackish, and has a muzzle similar to that of a horse or a burro, though shorter, which is armed with 4 peg-shaped canine teeth. Its formidable claws are shaped like those of the giant anteater, Myrmecophaga tridactyla, but are the size of those of the giant armadillo, Priodontes maximus. Its tail is short and broad or large and thick. Additionally, Luis Jorge Salinas claimed that the animals he saw had humped backs, strange tortoise-like necks, and chests devoid of hair, which is also a feature of the Kita harara. According to most accounts, it can walk either quadrupedally or bipedally, but the bipedal gait is often described as unsteady. Salinas describes a Charlie Chaplin gait. It is said to be nocturnal and crepuscular, that is active at night and twilight, and feeds on vegetation including bacaba, Oenocarpus bacaba, and babasu palms, Atalea speciosa, which it twists to the ground and tears apart in order to feed on the palm heart and berry-like fruits. It is said to be migratory, descending from the Andean foothills around February and Acre, near the Peruvian border. Its tracks are found in the ground around vegetation, even during the dry season, when the earth is baked hard. Its first call is a low roar reminiscent of thunder, while the other is a very loud, higher-pitched cry, just like a human shouting, but with a growl at the end. This second cry often impresses and terrifies people who claim to have heard it. Claimed eyewitness Inocencio, who initially mistook the cry for that of a man, described it as wild and dismal, horrible, deafening, and inhuman. Oren described a call heard by himself as being extremely strong and of steady pitch, lasting for up to 45 seconds, and resembling jets flying over low. Grunts, growls, and groans are also sometimes described. A very strong and unpleasant smell is frequently described, compared to a mixture of feces and rotting flesh. Garlic vine, Mansoa aliacea, and a fetid peccary, or simply described as just the worst odor they ever smelled. The smell leaves people lightheaded and nauseous or even renders them unconscious. Most famously, it is reputed to be invulnerable to bullets and arrows unless hit in the navel, the eyes, the mouth, or sometimes elsewhere on the head. This invulnerability is sometimes attributed to thick or crocodile-like skin or to the animal's hair. Hunters who claim to have shot specimens say they used special solid lead shotgun slugs fired at the head. A special shot used for hunting tapirs fired at the navel from a .16 caliber shotgun, and all the bullets of a .38 caliber revolver emptied into the chest. David Oren has collected over 100 accounts of the Mapinguari or animals like it, and as of 2002 had interviewed 7 hunters who claimed to have shot specimens. 3 hunters claimed to have actually captured living Mapinguaris in quite recent times, but all 3 animals escaped because the men were unable to bear the stench. A group of Kanamari Indians living in the Rio Jarua Valley claimed to have raised 2 infant ground sloths on bananas and milk after their mother was scared off by hunters. After some time, they progressed to feeding on foliage, but after 1 or 2 years, the unbearable smell of their skin prompted the Indians to release them. The Segamai is a cryptid reported from the Peruvian Amazon near the Vilcabamba mountain range, described as a fearsome sloth-like animal. It is usually considered a regional name for the Mapinguari on account of its almost identical description. It is described as a cow-sized animal which can walk both quadrupedally and bipedally, with dark matted fur, said to resemble the fibers surrounding the leaf stems of an Oenocarpus batawa palm, and a snout similar to a giant anteater's. It is said to live in caves in the remote cloud and foothill forests, where it feeds on cyclanthaceae plants and palm piths. The Machiguenga are terrified of it due to its reputedly aggressive behavior, and it has a number of alleged characteristics in common with the Mapinguari. It is said to be impervious to bullets, has a terrible roar, and supposedly generates an odor which stupefies or knocks out anyone who comes close to it. In 1997, anthropologist Glenn Shepard Jr. suggested to some Machiguenga, who told him about the Segamai, that it might be a bear. The Machiguenga, who knew spectacled bears, Tremarctos ornatus, well, expressed great surprise and affirmed that the 2 animals are completely different. One of the tribe matter-of-factly told him that he had seen a Segamai at Lima's Natural History Museum when he was a student, and when Shepard checked, he discovered that the museum had a diorama featuring a model of a giant ground sloth. However, the student had never seen the Segamai himself and had previously assumed it to be mythical. The Ujea is a bear-like cryptid reported from Ecuador. A sure source describes it as a bear-man hybrid with an odor strong enough to knock a grown man unconscious, which feeds on flower nectar and is not dangerous to man, leading to it formerly being hunted by the Shuar. A picture drawn by the Shuar who gave this description depicts the Ujea as a man-like being with shaggy red hair on its head and back, a long tongue and strongly hooked claws. A different source describes it as a gorilla-like monster which is dangerous, so much so that women and children fear to leave their houses during the night. However, because the Ujea is too large to enter houses, they can kill it by spearing it from within their doors. A colleague of J. Richard Greenwell claimed to have seen a ground sloth outside a cave in Ecuador in the 1980s. It was described as a 10-long animal with shaggy hair and a horse-like snout, and was capable of standing bipedally to browse on vegetation and walking quadrupedally. Several sightings of the Kita Harara have occurred on the Caritiana Reservation, especially near an area apparently known as the Cave of the Mapinguari, southwest of Kiowa. In one of the earliest reported sightings, a hunter named Valdemiro who approached the cave was startled by a terrifying cry, followed by the animal itself emerging from the cave. Valdemiro noticed that the animal balanced on the sides of its feet, holding its claws inwards. In 2006, a Caritiana from the village of Kiowa recounted several sightings or close encounters. It is frequently heard breaking down palm trees at night, and a Caritiana saw a giant sloth near a stream in a field near the village and shot it, but it didn't die. One once entered the village of Kiowa itself, prompting everyone to flee. A Caritiana hunter named Giovaldo claimed to have shot and injured one in 2003 or 2004. During Pat Spain's Animal Identity Parade interview with Giovaldo for Beastman, the animals which he is shown on screen to have no reaction to are an African elephant, a Bengal tiger, a spectacled bear, a white rhinoceros, and a gorilla. He showed no recognition of the spectacled bear and thought the gorilla could be some sort of monkey. Giovaldo recognized the giant anteater and stated that the animal he had seen was much different, with the only slight similarity being in the arms. When an image of the ground sloth Megalonyx was shown, Giovaldo unhesitatingly nodded and identified it as what he had seen, stating that, "It was kind of like that. I think that was the animal. I really think that looks like it. Its arms were just like that." One difference he noted was that the claws on what he saw were similar but even larger. Other than that, it had the same body, the same arms, and the same face.
What's their problem?
Hi, I'm Chilean. Those are Selk'nam, one of the tribes that lived in the extreme south of my country. And the reason for their painting on the body was practically multi-purpose. They basically used the paint for aesthetic purposes. But on the other hand, they also used it for practical purposes, such as to go hunting or to help them bear the cold of Patagonia a bit. In addition of social reasons, since the painting made them distinguish between the old roles of their society, in addition to communicating their states of mind or activities. Also clarify that they were not the only tribe that used these paintings. Many other tribes from the south in Patagonia used paints on their bodies, however. The Selk'nam were characterized by being the ones who went the furthest with these designs to the point of reaching the gloomy designs that you probably already know. And this is because the Selk'nam in their initiation rite, Hain ritual, sought to disguise themselves with these masks and paintings as spirits, deceiving and frightening others who believed that they were really seeing a spirit in addition to legitimizing the dominance of men over women. So if their masks seem creepy or repulsive to you, then they did the job.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.